Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about my ANA story. So basically when I first tested positive or had a positive ANA and just kind of how that's evolved. If you have not seen my video explaining what an ANA is, I highly recommend that you watch that video first before this one. That way, you know what it is. I'm not going to re-explain it in this video because then it would make the video really long. So my first positive ANA was sometime around 2010, 2011. So I don't have the exact years because it's been probably over 10 years since that first positive test. That's when I first started experiencing, a lot of the muscle stiffness. Well, I started experiencing muscle stiffness long before that, but when it started spreading to other parts of my body, I don't think I had the light sensitivity yet, but I was definitely going in that direction. So I was quickly becoming disabled. And so I had a positive ANA. Now, the problem here was that the doctors considered it borderline. And I went to a general doctor, like a, primary care doctor, and he said that it was borderline, like borderline lupus, borderline whatever. As we know, if you've watched my other video, an ANA is just a general like autoimmune marker, I guess. It's not telling you exactly what type of autoimmune illness you have. So he didn't really seem too concerned, and at that point, I had already been, I think a physical therapist had told me to go see this Lyme literate doctor, and I was kind of already heading in that direction. And obviously, Lyme disease is an infectious illness, so I was like, well, maybe it's that and not this. I really didn't know at that point. I really didn't even know what an ANA was, but it did pop up on there. Um, so after that, I found my LLMD, went through all of that, um, treatment and all of that. And it wasn't until after when I lost my IVIG the first time that I started to pursue that diagnosis for stiff person syndrome. And there is, I went to a Lyme disease support group and I was told to go see a hematologist that I guess was like, an ally of, people with Lyme disease. He apparently could get you IVIG if you had like a positive ANA or something. And I was referred from the Lyme disease support group. Um, I'm not going to go into that story either because it's a long one, but there's a video that I have on here called The Worst Doctors Ever, and I explain in detail what happened with this guy and the subsequent rheumatologist that I went to. So he ran the test, and my ANA came back positive. So this was in 2016. So we're going from around 2011 to 2016. That's a 5-year difference. I had been off of my IVIG for about 2 years at this point, at least 2 years, maybe like 2.5, somewhere around there. So my ANA came back positive. The weird thing is that I don't recall him explaining to me thoroughly what it meant because there were other things on the test that I really actually just only recently looked at and was actually, I think, told what they meant. Um, the only thing he told me was you need to find a rheumatologist. And if you want to know what happened, go watch that video of The Worst Doctors Ever. I eventually found a rheumatologist. These two knew each other, but I didn't find him as a referral. I just found the rheumatologist. And, at first the rheumatologist took me seriously. And then after he got in touch with this hematologist, at my second, my follow up with the rheumatologist, he was just like, your issues are psychosocial, blah, blah, blah. So that led me to believe that second ANA was also not that big of a deal. And of course, I can't read the blood work. And I think doctors rely on that a lot. The fact that we don't know what we're reading and we don't know how to read the blood work or to know like whether it's severe or whether it's mild. I think he like recommended steroids. He was going to prescribe me steroids if I wanted them, but he basically told me my issues were psychosocial, meaning I had mental health problems. So I didn't really think much of it. And after that was 2016. It still took me another 2 years to finally get to UCLA and get my prescription for IVIG, my diagnosis of SPS and prescription for IVIG. And I think because of that positive ANA, the doctor at UCLA was able to get me the IVIG and the diagnosis. But again, none of these doctors ever really clearly told me anything until recently. So after I got my IVIG, I was like, I'm fine. I don't, I knew I had that positive test, but I was like, I have my medication. I'm good. I don't need to be asking any more questions. Um, so recently, last month, I actually saw a rheumatologist. As you know, I did exosomes earlier this year, and the treatment has not been going as expected. And because of my concern, since my symptoms have gotten worse, I decided, it probably would be a good idea. My primary care actually told me, you should see a rheumatologist. If you have an autoimmune illness, you should have a rheumatologist. So I said, hey, let's do it. I need some blood work done. Let's go and let's do this. So she referred me to a rheumatologist that's like in network for my insurance. So I went and saw her. I took a copy of this ANA, which I think was on file. So keep in mind, it's 2022. This ANA is from 2016. That's a good, 6 years or 4 years? Some more than, it's 6 years. So it's like I'm getting an ANA done every 5 years, which I think is kind of, for someone that has ongoing medical issues, I would think that they would run it, more frequently, but whatever, I'm not a doctor. And I took it to her and I told her, she said, who ran this? And, or she asked me, what rheumatologist did you see? And I couldn't remember the guy's name, but his name was actually on the test. And I told her what he told me, that my issues were psychosocial and, he wanted to talk to my therapist. And she says, I don't know why he would tell you that, because what I'm seeing here is indicative of a lupus diagnosis. She didn't say like you have lupus, but she said that it was indicative of lupus. And when I went back and looked at the blood work, it wasn't just a positive ANA. I had a couple of other things. I think like a C4, C3, other things that can indicate some type of autoimmune condition. And she was like, I don't know why he would tell you that, given that, she didn't say you're very, very sick, but it was indicative of maybe something like lupus. It wasn't like a vague, borderline like the first test was. So, when she told me that, I was like, wow, from the test in 2011 or 2010 to the test in 2016, I worsened because she didn't tell me it was borderline. The first doctor told me that first test was borderline. So I went from borderline to it's starting to look like lupus. So she said, you know what, we're gonna go ahead. She said, I'm gonna run more tests. She was gonna redo the ANA and then run some other stuff, check me for celiac, rheumatoid arthritis, things like that. And she said, let's take a look at this again. And so we did those tests last month. And, I just wanted some testing done because I don't know what's going on with my body post exosomes. There's a lot that's been going on. Some pain is worse. Well, all pain is worse. I have more joint, pain issues than I had before, kind of feeling more foggy, more out of it. So, I thought there's got to be something, right? There's got to be something going on. So we did the test, and everything came back more or less fine. And my ANA was also gone. So there are also other antibodies, an SM, RMP, and lupus panel, the rheumatoid panel, the celiac, all of that, and all of that is gone. Now, I do have to say, and I did say in my ANA, when I explained the ANA in the other video, that you can still have an autoimmune illness without an ANA. But keep in mind, I'm also GAD65 negative. I have another video of that in my stiff person syndrome playlist if you want to know what that is. So it really left me baffled as to why now I have nothing and I feel terrible. Now, I had already done this video. I had already filmed this whole story. And that's kind of where I ended the video, but I actually recently found out another tidbit about the ANA. And I did make a video. I had a follow up with my oncologist. So if you want more specific details, you can go and look at that video. But the ANA, my oncologist basically, and again, this should have been something that my rheumatologist should have spoken to me about, because I did have a follow up with her after the blood work. And I don't recall her mentioning this, but according to my oncologist, because they're all in the same network, so they all have access to the same blood work, my oncologist said she did put a note here that the reason that your ANA may have come back negative is because you were on IVIG. She said sometimes the effects of the IVIG can last quite some time. And she explained to me that some people with multiple sclerosis do IVIG, but they do it like once every 2 years. So it can actually hold them off for that amount of time. So that was really interesting, although my rheumatologist should have told me that. And I don't recall her saying that in our follow-up appointment. And she did put that as a note on the in my file. So, in my original video when I shot this the first time, I was like, this is mysterious. Why, maybe the exosomes, and it's possible that the exosomes may have made the ANA go away as well. But given that I stopped IVIG in April, I've done 2 small doses since then, it's possible that that's probably the more likely reason why I'm not showing an ANA. I did say also in the original, the first ANA where I explained what an ANA is, that ANAs can also be positive from an underlying viral illness or cancer. So it's possible that there could have been some underlying viral illness. I do know that my SED rate, which is a marker of acute infection, has gone down significantly. That could mean that whatever underlying viral or some other kind of infectious thing has gone away. That can be another reason why the ANA is gone. But like I said, it's probably more than likely the the IVIG. And I'm glad that she told me that and clarified that, because I was over here like Sherlock Holmes trying to figure out why it had disappeared, and it really wasn't that. It wasn't even like that complex. That's kind of one of my pet peeves with some of these doctors. The rheumatologist was very clear to me that she manages like 5 distinct illnesses, which is like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren's, and some other autoimmune stuff. And she was like, that's what I treat. But then I go to my oncologist, who she's a hematologist oncologist. She treats cancer. That's her thing. And she's literally explaining all of this stuff that has to do with autoimmune illness to me. And I do think that doctors should have a general knowledge of everything, not just their own specialty, because their specialties overlap. For example, my SPS is treated by a neurologist at UCLA, but SPS is also an autoimmune illness. My rheumatologist knows nothing about SPS. She literally told me I treat 5 illnesses. This is what they are, and that's that. And it's like, I do think that is why our medical system here in the US, and probably in most other countries, is so difficult to navigate, because like I said, a lot of these specialties overlap. And if you're in one of those overlapping, specialties, for example, my neurologist at UCLA, yes, they deal with movement disorders, which would be SPS, probably multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, things like that. But these also overlap with autoimmune illness sometimes. So they should have a working knowledge of autoimmunity, immunology, or have kind of like a double specialty because, if especially if you're at the university level, you should have a specialty in both because you're dealing with both. And I was very impressed with my oncologist. Definitely watch that. I think it's called My Oncology Follow Up. It may upload before or after this video. I was very, very impressed that she was explaining these things to me that are outside of her scope of practice, really. And the original doctor who knows about this stuff didn't say anything. She did put it in her notes, but didn't say anything to me in my follow up specifically about that. So just know that if you are on IVIG and some kind of immunotherapy like that, that can cause, even if you've stopped the medication, it can actually cause your blood work to be different. So I think it would probably take a couple years because the first time I was on IVIG, I stopped it, I think mid 2014, the summer of 2014. And this blood work was done in 2016. So probably 2 years later. So it probably takes a good 2 years for, I guess, for all of the effects to leave the system. And I do recall the first time when I did IVIG, I seemed to have been stable for a couple of years after I stopped the IVIG. Granted, yes, I did feel the difference of like right off the bat, but I was more or less stable, I recall, for about a couple of years after I had stopped my IVIG completely. So, you can have a certain level of stability, you know, for some time afterwards, but it can affect your blood work. And so it wasn't a mystery. It wasn't a mystery after all. It was pretty obvious, I guess. And my neurologist at UCLA had mentioned, when I had the positive GAD65, she told me the same thing. She said that could be your IVIG because remember, it's full of antibodies and you probably are showing a positive GAD65 because of the antibodies from the medication. So, she really these types of medications, especially because they contain antibodies and they are from, it's a human plasma product, they probably can mess with your blood work because they come from human blood. So it's just one thing to know. And I know a lot of other drugs can cause blood work to come back, abnormal or, different. So I wanted to make sure that I redid this video and put that correction in there because I was definitely like I said, I was totally like Sherlock Holmes, like such a mystery, and it really wasn't. So I just wish I had doctors that were a little bit more on top of it. Like I really think that in the group of doctors that I have right now, I have maybe 2 exceptional doctors. But yeah, I wanted to go ahead and tell you guys my journey. And this may help other people that are out there that are looking for a diagnosis or that are looking to, what kinds of tests do I get? If you are suspecting an autoimmune illness, you would definitely go to a rheumatologist first, and an ANA, I think, is kind of their first line of testing right off the bat. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.